bit of music on. There we go in the background, hopefully.
Come on, Uncle Jenkins. I can't hear Uncle Jenkins. Oh, there he comes. Here he goes.
There we go. Oh, and there's the live button, so I'll just press that. Here we go, we're on, we're live. Looking forward to it, says Tiffany. Brilliant. Okay. Got 8 people on, 9 people already, so welcome everybody. Hope the music in the background is just about loud enough to hear with me talking over it, and just turn the volume down on my phone. There we go, so I can see me live as well as whatever else is going on. So welcome to another Leaders Live. Just trying to find the comments here, comments and reactions. There we go, super. We'll be on in a minute. So where are we counting down to? 16. So lovely.
No more Uncle Jenkins.
Let me just turn that off so I can see what I'm doing. So, how are we doing, everybody? Welcome. It's a Tuesday morning here in the UK. It's just after 8:45, and we are live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, folks. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Leaders Live Breakfast Show. A quick teaser for you this morning before we talk to Tiffany, and we're already getting likes. And hello, Syed, good morning, he says to Andrew and Tiffany. Brilliant. Okay, so quick teaser for you. Yeah, hi, we'll come back to you in a moment. Would you like to be able to negotiate with aplomb, i.e. more self-confidence and in demanding situations? And do you think that negotiating a deal should be like playing hardball where there are winners and losers, or is there a better way? And can we really work from a place of alignment instead, where we can mutually agree and even brainstorm creative solutions perhaps and establish deep trust? Or should we just fall back to negotiation tactics instead? In this rapidly changing world, is it even possible for us to negotiate win-win outcomes that can really help you sell more and deliver better? And if this was possible, folks, what would negotiations look like? What may they sound like? And how would they feel? We'll be getting to all that in the next 30 minutes or so. So if you don't know me, I'm Andrew Jenkins. And this morning I'm joined by the awesome Tiffany Kemp. Hi, Tiffany. How are you doing?
Good morning, Andrew. I'm very well indeed. Thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing brilliantly. Let me just give you a round of applause. There we go. Lovely.
That's good to start off with a round of applause before I've actually said anything. That's comforting, You think, yeah, feel welcome. Thank you.
Indeed. And Stuart Sam Kenj, if that's his name. Hello, Tiffany. Research to know your wish, want, walk numbers. Oh, right. Okay.
Ooh,
brilliant.
Okay.
We'll just don't know where he's from, but that is, let me just pop him up.
That's the 3 W's. I think that's good. I haven't actually heard it described that way, but that works perfectly well. Wish, want, walk. I like that.
I like that, yeah. And this is,
someone
says good morning. So there we are. So there's just a few comments.
Good morning, everybody.
Coming up. Yeah, super. Okay, so we'll come back to Tiffany just in a few moments, but we're going to talk about the art of intelligent negotiation to help you sell more and deliver better. That's today's topic. So come back to Tiffany in a minute. So, we've been building a lively crowd over the last few weeks on the weekly Leaders Live Breakfast Show. We had Roger Terry last week talking about all things NLP and human excellence. So if you want to catch hold of that, please watch the replay. It's still around on LinkedIn and all the other channels. As always, please interact on these channels you've already been doing. We'll pick up some of your comments as we're going along, like Saeed's here, so I'll just take that one off. If you're new to the channel, put new and in the chat so we can say hello to you. Use Q if you want to ask questions as we're going along. Makes it easier for us to pick them up. And please let me know if the audio is coming through okay to you for both, for the two of us. So just before we get going, just a quick context setting. So listen, I set up Leaders Live to explore high-performance team topics and to interview people with the mindset and passion to help businesses succeed in these rapidly changing times that we're living through. You've got to be living under a rock if you haven't realised that things are changing massively. And we ain't going to snap back to pre-pandemic times either. But there's a lot more going on than that. And actually, the research tells us that around 80% of key business change projects, they don't actually deliver on their promised game changer change. So, I believe that the real situation here is about facilitating your people to make a difference by being awesome together. And I'm kind of known as the high performance guy, and Tiffany's known as the contract negotiation lady. I wonder. I've just made that up actually, so I don't really know for sure. And the real impact here about high performance teamwork is what happens between people. This is really relevant about what we're talking about today. And that's the niche we explore here. So Leader's Life really taps into the innate human superpower of I to the power of we. That's kind of where we're going. So let's come back to Tiffany. Quick introduction for Tiffany. Just see what's going on in the chat just for a moment. So Stuart says good morning. Nicholas says it's buffering my end. Not sure how everyone else is. I think we're okay. I don't think we're seeing any buffering. Please let us know if there's any buffering. Sometimes there is a bit of buffering on when we go live. Don't know. Depends on lots of different factors. So we'll keep an eye on that for you, Nicola. So listen, Tiffany is the CEO of Devant, and Tiff and her team deliver strategic commercial guidance and tactical contract support. And Tiffany's LinkedIn strapline is speaker negotiation and a contracting expert. And she's an author of 2 books, Deal Makers, How Intelligent Use of Contracts Can Help to Sell More and Deliver Better, and Essential Contracting Drafting Skills, a Practical Guide. Cool. So Syed says crystal clear my end. Thank you, Syed. That's really useful to hear. So Tiffany, the art of intelligent negotiation to help to sell more and deliver better. Let's dig into this fascinating subject in this next 20 minutes or so. Let's start with a recent example, Tiff. Talking about negotiation tactics. We all lived through Brexit, right? What a time that was. I'm not sure I really enjoyed
that
Brexit.
Was a lesson.
Every day for 2 years, we had nothing on Radio 4 but Brexit. And isn't that just a typical example of how to negotiate? Where, no one really shows their hand. And this is about dancing around the handbags hardcore, on steroids, right? What do you say? What say you, Tiff, to that?
What's like I? Well, the Brexit negotiation was a beautiful lesson in how not to do things, but it was also a lesson in how hard stuff is to do. And so one of the questions that I put on LinkedIn yesterday was, what's the bit of negotiation advice that you found useful and what has been a bit of a waste of time? And one of the things that I've observed with the Brexit negotiations is a whole raft of armchair pundits saying, you don't want to do it like that, you want to do it differently. But how many of them have had to manage such massively diverse sets of stakeholders with very strongly opposed objectives? And going into bat where you've got, half your team is actually, they're using the bat back to front. Half the team doesn't actually want to hit the ball with the bat at all. They just want to do a bit of juggling in the background. And the other half has completely lost interest and they're just flaked out in the corner with a cold beer. But how can you negotiate a deal when you've got so many different versions of what good looks like that you're done for? It doesn't matter what outcome you come out with, you've got to be upsetting a large proportion of your stakeholders. And I think that's what was happening to some extent in Brexit, because both the EU, who were trying to bring together the interests of a hugely diverse set of EU members, and there were diversions within each member state, and then there were the member states themselves, and then there was us lot. With all of our different opinions, and the Brexiteers and the Remainers, and those that thought, okay, sacrifice shipping, so long as we've got London's a financial centre of excellence, we can give away all the fish. And then you've got the fishermen who think, forget mortgages and financial transactions. We don't want the French eating our fish. It was a really, really difficult job, and that's not to say that they did the best they could with what they got, because I don't think anybody would go that far. But it was a massive challenge for them.
Absolutely. And you know what? If we take that as a, just the Brexit philosophy, that we take that as a role model, doesn't this simply suggest that it's just a power game, Tiffany? It's who has the upper hand, and each and every complex sticking point. Ergo, winner takes all, with a few concessional compromises thrown in for good measure. What do you think?
One of the comments on LinkedIn yesterday, in answer to my question, was one of the good bits of advice was BATNA. And actually, that comment that you shared earlier on, know your wish, your want, and your walk away, it's very, very tightly linked to the BATNA. So when it comes to power, you have power in a negotiation if you have a good alternative to a deal with this party. So if I'm looking to sell something to you, and there are dozens of people out there who can all give you exactly the same stuff that I'm giving you. Some of them are a bit cheaper, some are a bit more expensive, some will throw in some goodies on this side or some goodies on that side. Then you're in a really good position, because your best alternative to negotiating a deal with me is actually pretty good. You've got options. Assuming that you are the only customer that has spoken to me for the last 12 months, my alternatives would be pretty rubbish. So in that setup, yes, I would definitely be on the back foot, and it would be more difficult for me to negotiate a great deal with you than in one where we are more evenly matched. But we mustn't confuse power in negotiation with size or with cash, because those things can go together with power, but not necessarily. Okay. So one of my clients that I'm working with at the moment, they are making hugely expensive pieces of equipment which cost tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of pounds. And they have suppliers from all over the place, including the odd little one man in his shed who knows how to make a particular little widget really, really well. Okay. So you've got this massive global multi-million organization and a bloke in his shed outside Preston. Okay. Wow. And in that situation, you would expect all the negotiation clout to be with the big global corporate. But actually, if Pete in Preston is the only one that knows how to make this super duper clever engineering widget, he's the one that has the power. Okay. Because their best alternative to negotiating an agreement with Pete is to invest a huge amount of time and money in getting somebody else to develop Pete's widget independently. So that whole what is your alternative question is worth having a really good understanding of before you start negotiating, and making sure you understand what your other party's best alternative is as well, because it might level up the playing field. It might take you by surprise. You might feel that you've actually got a lot more clout than at first it might have appeared.
So good old Pete from Preston has more clout than he expected, right?
Indeedy.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Look, so Tiffany, I know that you are an advocate of seeking alignment, and you talk about mutual interests and negotiating win-win outcomes. But, this all sounds a bit namby-pamby, doesn't it? Dancing around the handbag stuff. It's a bit fluffy, isn't it? Surely, Tiff, negotiation is a good old slogging match, where there are only winners and losers, and it's all about the best bargaining tactics, right?
I love that. And win-win has potentially got connotations of being a bit tree huggy, a bit soft, a bit fluffy, a bit, you go in there for win-win and they'll beat the living daylights out of you while you're not looking, and it can happen that way. It absolutely can. And so it's important that before you start, you make sure that both of you are on the same page, because if your counterparty is going in there for a very positional win-lose negotiation, and you're going in with a lovely, touchy-feely, collaborative, open win-win style, you will get done over. So I'm not going to dance around my handbag. If you have got to be on the same page, right? But the reasons for doing it are because it will drive better outcomes for both of you. So if you're dealing with an intelligent counterparty who's looking to have a mutually beneficial, profitable, long-term relationship, then they will join in. They will play nicely. The difficulty is, a bit like Brexit, you might find that the human on the other side of the desk to you, the person that you're speaking to in your Zoom camera, is a perfectly decent, lovely human who completely understands the whole collaborative negotiation thing, wants to build a lasting relationship. But somewhere up there, they've got a boss who's basically saying, screw them down, get every last penny out that you can, and don't give anything. And that's, back to the Brexit challenge. If your stakeholders aren't lined up with your strategy and negotiation approach, then it's really difficult to follow through on it. Even if you believe in it and they believe in it, if either of you has got stakeholders who are measuring your outcomes in very black and white, simple terms, short-term terms often, then it can make it really difficult for you to negotiate in a collaborative way.
So how do you resolve that, Tiff? Is there any way to resolve that, or is it just biggest person shouts loudest wins?
No, you have to start with your internal stakeholders. Before you get anywhere near your counterparty, you've got to make sure your internal stakeholders are aligned. And if they think that, let's just take an example. Let's go away from Brexit for a sec. Let's take an example of, say you're negotiating to buy an enterprise resource planning system for your business, massive ERP system. Okay. Yeah. So you're going to be putting all of your business intelligence, all of your day-to-day operational stuff into this platform.
Right.
Okay. You're going to be entrusting this provider with helping you to run and manage your business efficiently and effectively for years to come. So it's pretty obvious to you listening to me speak that is not a provider that you really want to upset.
Right.
It is not somebody where you want to kick off the relationship with them trying desperately to claw back whatever advantage they possibly can to retrieve the bad negotiation that they've just done with you.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you think about what you want out of that relationship over the long term, it should be pretty evident that having a fair collaborative relationship with that counterparty is going to deliver the best outcomes for your business over the years. And if you need to have that conversation with others internally, you need to get them on side before you go into bat with your counterparty. Because if you've got your CFO saying, yeah, but I'm sure they could knock another 20 grand off that installation fee. And you think, well, they could, but that means that they're not going to do a proper job. We're going to have to upload all of our data instead of them migrating it, because that's one of the ways they're going to shave some money off the cost. And frankly, if we do it, it's going to take 3 times as long because we've all got day jobs to do as well. And it's probably going to go wrong. And then we're going to try and blame it on them. And they're going to say, actually, it's not our fault because we didn't do that bit. You can see how you create problems and issues for yourself by trying to cut corners early on.
Right.
So it's really about having those conversations internally and making sure that everybody can understand the benefits.
So those grown-up conversations, right, Tiff, where, look, yes, I know you're looking to shave some money off this, but actually here's the reality for us. So this is what it's like on our side. And push back on that basis and kind of say that's why the price is the price, right?
Yeah, and having conversations about how you can save money in other ways. So talking to your vendor about how can we make this as efficient a process as possible. Which jobs, if you were project managing this, Mr. Vendor, which you will be, which jobs would you outsource to us? Because maybe we've got some cheap resources. Perhaps we can get some interns to do some data cleansing or whatever. Which things can you outsource to us that are not going to be critical path, not going to be potentially messing up the whole implementation of the system, but can save us paying you those resources? So look for creative solutions to achieve the outcomes that you want, rather than just assuming the only way to get the price down is to beat them up.
Right. Okay. Got that. And that leads nicely to this. We talked about positions and interests elsewhere, when you and I have been talking. What's going on here with this? We just talked about looking at, I suppose what we've just been talking about is thinking about needs and interests and positions there. So just talk us through this, from a basic point of view, what are we looking at here?
So positions are usually the view that you put out. That's the public bit, the bit that's above the water in your lovely picture there, Andrew. Right. So if I said, I don't want to pay more than 150 grand for this ERP system, that's my total budget. There's a position. Okay. Right. If you say, well, why? Well, one of my interests will be protecting my budget allocation for other things. So maybe I've committed to my board that I've got my budget set out for the year, and they've given me a certain amount for business improvement, which has got to cover off this ERP system and a number of other things. So if I spend more than 150k on the ERP system, there is less money for me to achieve the other initiatives that I want to achieve.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interest. How are you going to find that interest? You're only going to find that interest by asking questions and digging a bit deeper and trying to find out what's really going in within the organization. And if we want to get a little bit deeper still to find out what the underlying needs are,
right,
then we're looking at what are the drivers for all of these business improvement initiatives that I've got on my to-do list. What sort of changes do I want to deliver within my organization that I've said I've got a 150k pot for this one, I've got a 20k pot for that one, I've got a 50k pot for that one.
Okay.
It might be that if we have some discussions about those underlying needs, you can say, well, actually, if we tweak the way we're setting up that module here, we can tick that 20k job off at the same time, all within our budget.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So there are other ways of getting from A to B, but unless you really, really know what your counterparty's looking for, you won't see them. Right. And if all you're doing is battling the stuff above the water, you're missing out on so much potential for uncovering and creating value for both of you.
Which is the stuff that's hidden underneath the water, right? In this analogy here. That's really interesting, actually. So what you're suggesting is that it's not just about showing your hand in terms of your positions, but also to be able to talk about your interests and your needs as well with each other. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we see commonly in negotiations on the contract front, because in my world, negotiations start at the deal level. You start thinking about what's the big thing you're trying to achieve in your business.
Okay.
And then you filter all of that down to how do we actually agree a legally binding document that's going to encapsulate that and help us both to deliver that. Okay. And we find that contract negotiation bit often gets delegated to lawyers or procurement people who maybe don't have an understanding of what the underlying interests and needs are. They're purely focused on the above the line position stuff. They will look at things like, oh, well, you've only got a 12-month warranty. Right. We want a 24-month warranty. That's standard in our business. We want a 24-month warranty. And if we push under that, we can look at it. Their interest is, I don't want to have to go back to the head of legal to get sign off for something that's non-standard.
Okay.
Because that's going to make me look bad. I don't want to waste time trying to argue for you internally to get this amended because I've got shed loads of other things on my list of things to do. And frankly, you're not that important to me. So these are the things that we have to deal with when we get to the contract level. And we might think from our point of view, well, why do we want to stick with a 12-month warranty instead of a 24-month warranty? What's the incremental cost? How many claims would we typically get on the warranty in the first 12 months and in the first 2 years? How many issues have arisen over the past however many years that could potentially have resulted in a warranty claim? What's the cost of us agreeing to give you 24 months versus the cost of us digging our heels in, spending another 2 months negotiating, really upsetting your procurement guy because he's got to go and talk to legal and getting the relationship off to a bad start? Is there something else that we could possibly trade?
Okay.
So maybe we could say, well, we can give you a 24-month warranty, but we need you to sign up for at least 3 years of support.
Okay. Okay. So again, you're looking for those common interests, and this isn't about compromise, right? And this is looking for win-win. It's not compromise here, is what I'm hearing you saying.
No, it's looking for ways that you both get to gain something.
Yes.
Compromise is meeting somebody in the middle. The compromise would be saying, okay, well, let's go for 18 months warranty.
Yeah.
That would be a compromise. You're both equally hacked off with the outcome.
Absolutely. And does it really work? And in these situations, from your experience, does compromise work, or is a win-win outcome so much more better?
Well, compromise can get you through. Right. I mean, one of the other things to bear in mind about a lot of this stuff, and this, maybe you'd kick me under the table from across the airwaves here, but some of this stuff really doesn't matter. So sorry, folks, some of the stuff that you spend hours and days negotiating and haggling on really doesn't actually matter to the successful outcome of your deal. And so on some of those things that are positioning, they're all above the water, don't lose too much sleep over them. trade them, see what you can get in exchange, because everything that you give away is something of value to your counterparty. So it would be really good, and it's good for the relationship in that spirit of balance, to see if they're willing to offer you something in return. But don't waste your time and the goodwill of your deal haggling on stuff that really doesn't matter. So I think part of this exercise, I talked about making sure you get your stakeholders aligned.
Yeah.
Part of the prep that you should be doing before you go into bat with your counterparty is understanding the value to you and your organization of all of the things that are currently your points of difference. So if you look at your 12 versus 24 months of warranty, what's that worth to your counterparty? How much is it going to cost you? Unless you've thought about that and quantified that, you don't know whether this is something that's worth negotiating on or not.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is that what you think might be a position when you start might not be a position when you finish, right? Or even somewhere in the middle. That the positions change, I guess, as the understanding between both parties mutually, gets better and the trust builds. And it's like, well, we thought that was a position, but it probably really isn't, because actually we've talked through the interests of this, and we can, what we thought was an absolute hard stop line actually isn't at the end of the day.
Yeah,
we talked it through. That's interesting. There's a lovely story which when you and I met in a previous engagement, you talked about this lovely story about the orange.
It's not my original one, but I love it to bits. It's a bit of an old negotiation trope, but it's very helpful illustration. So it's two Greek boys were fighting over an orange. A Greek, because I guess you can pick them off the trees there. So they've got their orange. They're having a bit of a squabble about it. And Dad gets really impatient. It's like, come here, boys, give me that orange. And he takes it off them, and he whips out his pocket knife and he cuts the orange in half.
Okay.
And it's right, you have that half. You have that half. That parental challenge that never ends. It might be the iPad today, the orange tomorrow.
Split the iPad in half.
That would work a treat, I'm absolutely sure. And so the two boys go their separate ways, each with their half an orange. They both peel their orange half. One of them chomps away on the orange flesh and chucks his orange peel in the bushes. The other one throws the flesh in the bushes and goes home to make candied orange peel, which is one of his favourite sweets.
Wonderful.
And so obviously, moral of the story, if they had actually had a conversation first, they could both have got 100% of what they wanted.
Indeed.
And that's the benefit of why. Yeah. So when we're going into our negotiations and we're trying to suss out what those interests and needs are, why is your friend? Why do you want that? Why have you got that position? Why does that matter to you? Yeah. What would happen if you didn't get that? Nice. What would happen if you got more than that? Yeah. What impact would that have? That's so, really if somebody's saying, okay, I want 24 months, well, what would 3 years warranty be worth to you? Yeah. So I have one story. Can I share a little story with you from some years ago? We had a client, or have a client that makes furniture. And they make really posh office furniture. They're like super duper lovely IKEA furniture, but really super posh. And they were bidding for a contract with a large international organization they had sold to before. Right. And they knew that their biggest competitor was also bidding. And their biggest competitor is even more expensive than they are. These guys are, in the top price bracket, but their biggest competitor was even more expensive than they were. So they were pretty confident that they were not going to lose this deal on price. Okay. So they put their bid in. Yep. And eventually, after lots of effort going into this tender, they waited and they waited, and then they got the feedback from the client that unfortunately they had been down selected and their biggest competitor had won the deal. Wow. And they were absolutely gutted. And because they knew these guys fairly well, our client phoned up his ex-customer and said, look, I hope you don't mind doing a bit of a debrief, but can you tell me how they beat us? Yeah. We know they didn't beat us on price. So how did they do it? And his client said, actually, they beat you on total lifetime cost of ownership. Wow. And he's like, hang on a minute, how did they manage that? And he said, well, they offered a 15-year warranty and yours is only 10 years. So when we divided their bigger price by 15 years, it came to a lower number than your more modest price divided by 10 years. Wow. And that was an absolute light bulb moment for our client and for us, because what the competitor had done really smartly, they had figured, this is posh furniture. The companies that buy this stuff will have a regular refit and throw away everything away after 3 to 5 years. 3 years after you've sold the stuff, they're not going to have it anymore. So the chances of you getting a warranty claim, even in the second 5 years of ownership, are really remote. The likelihood of there being a warranty claim in that final 5 years of a 15-year warranty, minuscule. So the cost of offering an extended 15-year warranty was diddly squat to the competitor. But what it did to the maths, knowing how the client was going to assess the bids in total lifetime cost of ownership, even though everybody knows that in reality, they were not going to be using that furniture after more than 5 years. They had to do their TCO modeling based on this 15-year lifespan. So understanding that allowed the competitor to appear to give something away that cost them nothing and made them look an awful lot more cost effective. So I thought that was fantastic, true life story.
Really
and I know that my client won't mind me sharing that, because they were just as impressed with their competitor as I was.
That could have turned out differently though, Tiff, perhaps, if the client would have gone back to the other supplier and kind of said, look, actually you're up against a 10-year versus a 15-year warranty here. Do you want to go and have a look at your figures again and just see what's going on?
Absolutely. And if they'd shared that intel earlier on, then it could have been a very different outcome.
Yeah, and again, that was about positions. Well, we're not going to share that information. That's just their price and that's it. And yet they could have done even more with that, by negotiating on all parties, right? With that, if that was a game
and by
changer.
asking more questions, what's really important to you? Why is that important to you? How do you measure that?
Yeah.
How do you measure that? It's a good one.
Yeah, and who's the real winner here, actually? And was the loser, the loser lost, but they could have been the real winner if only more of that information was shared. So did the client get the right deal at the end of it? Who knows? But it's interesting, isn't it? That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting how assessment of the numbers will change things. Everything, you look at service level agreements. I don't know if any of you guys watching this have ever had to sign up to an SLA, but the calculations in SLAs,
I know.
It's so much nonsense. So sorry, I shouldn't say that. Some of you are probably really hard wedded to your SLAs, but whenever you're thinking of committing to an SLA as a customer or as a vendor, have a really good hard look at how you calculate whatever it is that you're measuring the service levels of, because the ones that I've reviewed over my too many years to count reviewing negotiating contracts, you can show anything you like, lies, damn lies, and statistics. SLAs should be in there as well. So look at how those numbers are worked out, because sometimes you'll find that a vendor can make a promise that looks really good, but when you actually do the maths, it equates to pretty poor performance being perfectly acceptable and still meeting the SLA. So whether you're going to be the vendor or the customer in that scenario, make sure you understand how your metrics work.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Okay. And Sayed says, hey, Tiffany, I normally start the negotiation process by focusing on building good rapport and relationships with people, vendors. What does it mean for each party if the deal is successful or unsuccessful, and just listening and understanding where they are coming from so that I can understand their emotional drivers to overcome their logical barriers? Does this resonate with you? ?
Perfectly. No, that's really, really good, because you're negotiating with humans, and whether it's IBM or Pete and Preston, it's humans that you're actually speaking to. And while we do need to bear in mind that entire network of stakeholders behind the human that you're working with, if you upset the human that's in front of you, you're not going to have a chance to influence the rest of those stakeholders. The only way you get to them is through this human that is in front of you right now. And so building a relationship, building rapport, understanding what makes them tick, understanding how they're rewarded as well. If they're in procurement and they get their reward based on what percentage they knock off of your list price, that's a very different dynamic to if you're selling to an owner manager whose reward is going to be delivered by the value that your product or service is going to add to their exit in 3 years' time.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, spot on. Stuart Samkanj says, I think I've pronounced his name right. Forgive me if I haven't, Sam. Stuart, sorry. If you didn't have X, what would that mean? Who else needs X and why? And if you had too much X, what would that mean? Great insights and questions, Tiffany. I'm not quite sure if those are questions for us or just what Stuart is saying to himself there, but interesting. See if I can get
That's
that
good.
up for
Yeah. And the more questions you ask, the better.
Right.
You
Well, there's the bottom line, isn't
basically
it?
you can't ask too many questions.
Yeah.
Ask questions, be interested, be curious,
Brilliant.
and try and ask why. What happens if? And try and suss out what your counterparty's BATNA is. What is their best alternative to a negotiated agreement with you? Are you the only player in town, or have they got lots of alternatives? Now, remember that any negotiator worth their salt is not going to tell you that you're the only game in town, even if you are, because they would be worried that's giving you too much power, unless they're in a tight spot and they've realized that actually the only way to get to a very good outcome with you is to be upfront and honest and get rid of all the beating around the handbag stuff, dancing around the handbag stuff, beating around the bush, mixing metaphors, and get to a quick resolution, because it's astonishing how much time we waste faffing and posturing and making ourselves feel puffed up and look good.
I beautifully said. And Jack Wright's just chipped in here.
Yes.
SLAs are my frustration, losing an opportunity because someone's statistics. I can't. I look better.
Yeah.
When in reality, the real world, it could be so much different. Absolutely.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And also you might find someone else's SLAs look fantastic, but they're not actually giving any service credits or liquidated damages in exchange for them, because they can promise the moon on a stick if they're never held to account. So, yeah. And
spot on, Jack. Yeah.
Very good observation. Yeah.
Yeah. No, nice one. So I think we're running out of time, and we could just keep talking, couldn't we? And there's some great tips there, and I love the way you just finished that. Sort of look, in negotiation, be curious. Think about the BATNA of the other person, and think about interests as well beyond just the positions that you start with. I think were 3 tips that you just gave. Is there any other little tips there that you could finish with for us?
Well, the last one, I would say, leave your ego outside the room.
Oh,
just
lovely.
And I know that's a big one to chuck in at the end, but if you take your ego in with you, you make yourself easy to manipulate. And I've seen that a lot, especially in my career when I was a young woman. Obviously, I've got plenty of grey hairs now, but when I was a youngster, middle-aged men, sorry chaps, were incredibly easy to manipulate, because a little bit of polishing from the ego from a young woman, and they were like, oh yes dear, and they would think that they were in the upper hand. Sorry, this could be I'm shooting girl power in the foot here. But leave your ego outside the room, focus on the deal. It's about getting the best outcome from a deal perspective, not about having your ego stroked, because if you make yourself vulnerable to flattery, then you are not going to get a great deal.
Yeah, and both of those are sort of win-lose sort of situations, aren't they? Where really you need to be win-win and go above that, and that really easy to get stroked, isn't it? As well, as well as to kind of just carry on with your own ego as well. So good advice, sage advice. Thank you. So, Tiffany, brilliant. So as I said, we could go on for ages, couldn't we? So. So further food for thought, useful topic. I hope you really enjoyed that, folks. Sounds like we might need a round 2, Tiffany. And so Jack Wright says, thank you, Tiffany and Andrew. Another content-filled live. Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Jack. That's great. And by the way, look, if you're seeking to know more about contract or writing contracts for your business, please contact Tiffany directly. And if you're seeking any help with building high-performance teams, then please contact me via my website, PDX. I'll put all the links in the feed once we're finished. It'll come through a little bit later, so you can check those out. Also, if you are an SME business owner or a CEO, who's finding it lonely in the top and who isn't, then please feel free to contact me about joining our Inspired CEOs community. And Tiffany, you were a Game Changer conversation guest last week. In what way would you endorse Inspired CEOs? I'm going to put you on the spot here. What would you say about Inspired CEOs for you?
Because you challenge all of your members, you really do get them to think about what they can use from the things that they're learning. Because let's face it, I'm looking here at my shelves full of books. We've all got loads of business books that we've read. We listen to business gurus, nothing happens unless you move molecules.
Nothing
You
happens.
actually have to do stuff to make change happen. And one of the things I love about your Inspired CEOs is that you hold your members to account. Say, what are you going to do? How are you going to shift molecules in the world today using that new knowledge to actually make a difference? And that's where the value really comes.
That's brilliant. And that the whole thing about agitating molecules means that the whole thing heats up, right? Which then has its own energy, which then creates the change that you need through heat, basically, and resistance. Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. That's brilliant. So, so as I said, the links will be in the description very shortly. Next week, folks, I'm interviewing Tilly Davis. That's all about how leaders benefit from LinkedIn. So look out for that. It's going to be a really interesting discussion on LinkedIn. That's all for now, folks. It's a goodbye from me and a good day from Tiffany. And we'll see you all again next week. And thanks again, Tiffany. And absolute superstar to have us on. And thank you for all the engagement today. And Syed says great value, says thank you. Jack says thank you, etc., etc. I'm sure there'll be more comments flowing through. So thank you very much, folks. That's it for today. Cheers. See you
Thanks a lot. Soon. Bye from me.
Cheers now. Bye-bye.